Well, it's that time of year again, folks. November hails the arrival of yet another Pokemon game. I've been playing them for 15 years now, since Red and Blue, back when I was a whippersnapper, and I thought it's the perfect time for me to do Danny's top 10 Pokemon. So, sit down and enjoy as I regale you with a pointless list of my top 10 Pokemon that I've been using since Red and Blue. Some are really good in fights, some I just like the design of. Let's jump in with number 10. In at number 10 is a relatively new Pokemon. It's number 609, Chandelure, the luring Pokemon. A spooky gothic chandelier with a blue will-o'-the-wisp flame inside. It's a perfect example for me of dual-type Pokemon. It's ghost and fire, both in appearance and gameplay. Appearance-wise, it's an inanimate object powered by a spirit, it's obviously a ghost type, but it's also a flaming lantern, obviously a fire type. Gameplay-wise, it has powerful ghost moves and powerful fire moves, but they work best in conjunction. You can burn something with a fire move, then hex it with the ghost move Hex, obviously, and it complements both. And there aren't that many dual type Pokemon that fits both in a perfectly even 50-50 like Chandelure does. I love it aesthetically, I love it gameplay wise, and it's a very powerful Pokemon in its own right, and that's why it's my number 10. In at number 9, we have something that I don't really have in because it's powerful, or even because I really like to use it because I don't. But we have Pokemon number 201, Unknown, the symbol Pokemon. When this Pokemon first showed up, I was fascinated by the fact that it has a unique shape for each of the 26 letters of the alphabet, and also a question mark. And they are basically sold to you as these are Pokemon from another dimension. They show up in the ruins of Alph, and you just wonder, what are these? I want to know more about these. And they were not so much a good Pokemon because Magnemite kind of filled the same design already, but they served to flesh out the world and really make you question, okay, this is, a RPG design for kids, but still you have raised a question and you've made me want to know more. And just because they're kind of slightly spooky and I like those kind of Pokemon, that's why this is my number 9. At number 8 we have a super recent Pokemon, and that's number 700, Sylveon, the intertwining Pokemon. Now, I know a lot of people write this off because they think it looks quote unquote girly, but I kind of like this one just because it's very unexpected. There's been a lot of Eevee evolutions, but I've always found I don't want to use Flareon because I can use a Charizard. There was always, for the type, something that appealed to me more, but Fairy was very new. I got a Sylveon by accident just messing around with Pokemon on me in X. I ended up trying it, and Sylveon basically ended up being one of my strongest Pokemon that still, level 100, is at the front of my party killing dragons left and right. It's an unexpected type. People don't expect it to be very strong, but it is. It's got a cool move set. It's got a few dark moves as well. Like all the fairy types, there's a slightly sinister undertone that maybe they're not as cute as they are. Maybe they're meant to be a little creepy in a grim fairy tale kind of way, but that obviously doesn't come through in the appearance. But regardless, it's a very strong Pokemon. Not many people expect it, a lot of people underrate it, and that's why it's my number 8. In at number 7 we have another odd one. This is Pokemon number 292, Shedinja, the Shed Pokemon. Back in the day, originally, Pokemon would only evolve 3 ways: via an evolutionary stone, via reaching a certain predetermined level, or via trading with another player using a link cable of all things back in the day. This was part of a generation 2 and 3 onwards, where they started to introduce new ideas and new ways to evolve Pokemon. In particular, Shedinja is actually a secondary Pokemon. If you evolved a Nincada into a Ninjask at level 20 and you had an extra slot free in your party and a second Pokeball, the husk that the Nincada would shed would be possessed by a ghostly spirit and gain a life of its own, and that will become Shedinja, a ghost bug Pokemon. I found it very interesting that it looks very cool, but also the fact that it's something discarded and yet it has its own will to live and becomes its own thing. Like, it wants to keep fighting for you as its trainer. And as a kid, I thought that was a really endearing idea, and I've always loved ghost Pokemon anyway, and there aren't enough cool bug Pokemon, and this one I find is pretty damn cool, and so that's why it's my number 7. Speaking of new mechanics and cool bug Pokemon, in at number 6 we have Pokemon number 205, Forretress, the bagworm Pokemon. This was back when they first introduced the idea of headbutting trees to make Pokemon fall from them, and I got a Pineco, and it evolved, and lo and behold, it was also my first Steel type Pokemon. Bug and Steel, Forretress has really high defense, it looks really cool, and it was just one of those Pokemon that you don't expect. If you go in blind and you aren't reading any guides, you're all of a sudden surprised that something that seems kind of small and weak suddenly becomes a powerhouse and becomes a staple of your team. And that's what Fortress was for me, and I've used him at least for a while in every game I've been able to get a Pineco since, and that's why he's my number 6. He's cool, he's strong, and he's altogether a great Pokemon. At number 5 we have everyone's favourite pathetic little fished up piece of garbage. That is Pokemon 129, and that's Magikarp. All of us remember back in the day, in Pokemon Red and Blue, we got conned outside Mount Moon. Someone said, "Hey buddy, you want to get a really cool Pokemon for a few Pokédollars?" And as a kid you're like, "Oh, wow mister, geez, great." And you get a Magikarp. All it can do is splash, and it does nothing. Also, it seems, with a little perseverance, eventually he learns Tackle, eventually learns to fight for himself, and when he reaches level 20, bam, you've got yourself a Gyarados, a really cool dragon Pokemon. It's a Pokemon I like because he's so stupid, and that he's pathetic, and that only makes him all the more endearing because through his trialing, perseverance, and attempts to get stronger, eventually you get something really, really cool, and it's not like you need to wait till like level 50 or something. You get him at level 20 so you can get him by the second gym, and it's a very conscious choice that there are people that will skip him and go, "No, that Pokemon's garbage," and they'll never get a Gyarados, or they will go and fish one up because you can find them everywhere. But the point is, if you took a gamble on him, he proved to be worth it in the end, and I have very, very fond memories of him, and that's why Magikarp is my number 5. At number 4 we have Pokemon number 429, and that would be Miss Magius, the magical Pokemon. It kind of looks like a witch. It's another ghost Pokemon, I know, but the aesthetic was so cool, but it also has a really cool moveset. It evolves from Miss Magius using a Dusk Zone, and if you hold off until about level 50ish, you can learn Power Gem in X and Y, which is a very, very cool move, but at the lower levels it has things like Shadow Ball and Shadow Sneak, and whilst it's not as strong as the strongest ghost Pokemon like Aegislash and Gengar, it's very powerful in its own right, but it also looks very cool as well, and so that's why it's my number 4. At number 3 we have Pokemon number 1, Bulbasaur, the seed Pokemon. Back in the day, this was my very first Pokemon. Back in Red and Blue, you're taken by Professor Oak to his lab in Pallet Town and given 3 choices. I chose Bulbasaur because apparently the guides I read at the time told me, hey, if you want a balance of attack and defense, go with Bulbasaur. And lo and behold, it turned out to be my faithful buddy throughout the game, and I was very glad to get one back in Pokemon X, and I don't know what to say about this one. It looks really cool, its evolutions are cool, it's got some really cool moves that have expanded when they've included poison typing into it in later generations, and of all the grass starters, it hasn't really been topped yet. It's such a cool design that I think it's timeless. It fits perfectly, whereas some of the fire and water type starters, they haven't aged so well, but Bulbasaur on the other hand looks as cool today as it did 15 years ago. I love it, it's always going to be one of my favourites, and that's why at number 3, I'm saying Bulbasaur. You were my original, very, very first Pokemon, and always going to be one of my favourites.
Oh God! Oh Jesus Christ!
In at number 2, we kind of have a little bit of a cheat in more way than one. I'm cheating by not mentioning technically a real Pokemon, and you kind of only found it by cheating in the game. I am, of course, talking about Missing No from Pokemon Red and Blue. Back in the day, I found this, it's a shame to admit, but I wanted to use a cheat to duplicate rare candies. Hey, I was 11 at the time, cut me some slack, but I was surfing up and down the coast of Cinnabar Island. I was just told that this would somehow allow me to dupe items. I did it, and lo and behold, this thing appeared. It wasn't a Pokemon, it kind of looked like a Tetris block. What was it? All it was called was Missing No, that I would later learn meant missing number. Of course, if you've played them by now, you've probably ran into it, you know what it is. It's a glitch Pokemon used to represent a space where there was a placeholder or something that was never added into the game. I think back in the day they said there was originally going to be 190 Pokemon, but a bunch of them were cut to be quote-unquote saved for later, but were never added. And so you had these weird, vestigial leftovers of data that was never added into the final build of the game. And so you'd find Missing No. I caught it, I leveled it up once, and it turned into a level 102 Starmie, which I used that to grind up some of my other Pokemon on the League a couple of times, but yeah, it was a programming quirk, according to Nintendo, and not a real part of the game. It could allow you to dupe items, it would also cause massive graphic glitches. It was a weird event, and it was also a tremendously easy one to achieve back in the day, whereas there weren't a lot of games with such a widespread and most commonly known bug that so many people remember to this day. People go, oh shit, I remember that, because it stuck with you. And that's why, even though he's not technically a Pokemon, everyone counts Missing No as a entity, and I include him just because it's a piece of leftover data intended to have been deleted, forgotten, and no one would ever know about this thing ever existing. But because it did, and because we know about it, this little leftover that should have been dead and forgotten has ended up a semi-quasi-Pokemon in its own right, and is remembered by the fans of the Generation 1 games just as fondly as anything like Pikachu or the starters have been. And so that's why Missing No is my number 2. Like it or not, yes, I'm cheating. And so here we are, folks, we've made it to number 1, and would you be surprised if I say it's a ghost Pokemon? Shock horror, I know, considering looking back at the list. You may be surprised to know that ghosts are my favourite type of Pokemon, but where did that all begin? Well, again, let's go back to Red and Blue. Young 11-year-old Danny makes it to a place called Lavender Town. The creepy music, the dark, shadowy streets, and there's a tower. You climb up the tower, and what do you see? Ghosts. A lot of ghosts. People grieving for their dead Pokemon. Apparently Pokemon don't just faint, they can also die. What's at the top though? You find the Pokemon get stronger. I found Pokemon number 93, Haunter, the Ghast Pokemon. Or Gas, it depends on what it is. Some people call it Ghast, some people call it Gas. I think it's Gas, at least it is in the EU version, but regardless, Ghost, Poison, very powerful. It evolves into Gengar, which is one of the most powerful Ghost Pokemon, but Haunter just has something that Gengar doesn't. It's kind of sold to you as a jokey trickster Pokemon. It's not, they force some of them to be sinister. This one wasn't forced to be sinister. He's just a ghost, and he's got that big, cheesy jack-o'-lantern style grin, and he just stuck with me. He was such a cool Pokemon that I didn't want to trade him. I didn't want to evolve him into Gengar, because yes, it was a power boost, but at the same time, this Pokemon that became my favourite Pokemon, he wouldn't be the same guy anymore. And I really loved the Pokemon. I think, if memory serves, he was originally going to be called Spectre, but they changed the name to Haunter. He evolves from Ghastly at level 25, evolves into Gengar when traded, and he's been in pretty much every game since the beginning. He's my favourite Pokemon, and I know some people will be thinking, not the best one to end on, but hey, this is a personal opinion, and personally, my opinion is that Haunter is my favourite Pokemon. I've used him in every game, he's always in my party, and hey, I get it, you're probably sick of ghost Pokemon in this top 10 at this point, but growing up, we all had our types that we loved, and I was the kid that really loved ghost Pokemon. They were creepy and cool, they had awesome moves and stuff like Destiny Bond and Shadow Sneak, and when you threw Poison into the mix, Haunter didn't just look really cool, Haunter could play really cool as well. And so that's why we've gone down our top 10, and at number 1 we have Haunter, my favourite Pokemon. And there you have it, this has been my top 10 favourite Pokemon, and now we can all wait for the release of the new Ruby and Sapphire remakes coming out later this month, where we can all catch them all over again, till the next time they introduce an entirely new set of Pokemon in another game, and then we need to fill up that Pokedex just that little bit more, but we'll always have our favourites to go back to. So for now, this is going to be the end of my video, and hopefully in the future I'll put up some information so you can all visit my secret base and challenge me to a fight with my ghost Pokemon. Thank you for watching, and now let's go and catch them all. Again.